for that of Berengaria. A negro, is he not, De Neville, with black skin, a head curled like a ram's, a flat nose, and blubbery lips? Ha! Worthy Sir Henry? Let not your Grace forget the shin bones, said another voice, bent outwards like the edge of a Saracen scimitar. Rather like the bow of a Cupid, since he comes upon a lover's errand, said the Queen. Gentle Neville, thou art ever prompt to pleasure us poor women, who have so little to pass away our idle moments. We must see this messenger of love. Turks and Moors have I seen many, but negro never. I am created to obey your Grace's commands, so you will bear me out with my sovereign for doing so, answered the debonair knight. Yet let me assure your Grace you will see something different from what you expect. So much the better. Uglier yet than our imaginations can fancy, yet the chosen love messenger of this gallant Soldan. Gracious madam, said the Lady Calista, may I implore you would permit the good knight to carry this messenger straight to the Lady Edith, to whom his credentials are addressed? We have already escaped hardly for such a frolic. Escaped? Escaped? Repeated the Queen scornfully. Yet thou mayest be right, Calista, in thy caution. Let this Nubian, as thou callest him, first do his errand to our cousin. Beside, he is mute too, is he not? He is, gracious madam, answered the knight. Royal sport have these Eastern ladies, said Berengaria, attended by those before whom they may say anything, yet who can report nothing, whereas in our camp, as the prelate of St. Jude's is wont to say, a bird of the air will carry the matter. Because, said De Neville, your Grace forgets that you speak within canvas walls. The voices sunk on this observation, and after a little whispering, the English knight again returned to the Ethiopian, and made him a sign to follow. He did so, and Neville conducted him to a pavilion, pitched somewhat apart from that of the Queen, for the accommodation, it seemed, of the Lady Edith and her attendants. One of her Coptic maidens received the message communicated by Sir Henry Neville, and in the space of a very few minutes the Nubian was ushered into Edith's presence, while Neville was left on the outside of the tent. The slave who introduced him withdrew on a signal from her mistress, and it was with humiliation, not of the posture only, but of the very innermost soul, that the unfortunate knight, thus strangely disguised, threw himself on one knee, with looks bent on the ground and arms folded on his bosom, like a criminal who expects his doom. Edith was clad in the same manner as when she received King Richard, her long, transparent, dark veil hanging around her like the shade of a summer night on a beautiful landscape, disguising and rendering obscure the beauties which it could not hide. She held in her hand a silver lamp, fed with some aromatic spirit which burned with unusual brightness. When Edith came within a step of the kneeling and motionless slave, she held the light towards her face, as if to peruse his features more attentively, then turned from him and placed her lamp so as to throw the shadow of his face in profile upon the curtain which hung beside. She at length spoke in a voice composed, yet deeply sorrowful. Is it you? Is it indeed you, brave Knight of the Leopard? Gallant Sir Kenneth of Scotland, is it indeed you, thus servilely disguised, thus surrounded by 100 dangers? At hearing the tone of his lady's voice thus unexpectedly addressed to him, and in a tone of compassion approaching to tenderness, a corresponding reply rushed to the knight's lips, and scarce could Richard's commands and his own promised silence prevent his answering that the sight he saw, the sounds he just heard, were sufficient to recompense the slavery of a life, and dangers which threatened that life every hour. He did recollect himself, however, and a deep and impassioned sigh was his only reply to the high-born Edith's question. I know I have guessed right," continued Edith. I marked you from your first appearance near the platform on which I stood with the Queen. I knew, too, your valiant hound. She is no true lady, and is unworthy of the service of such a knight as thou art, from whom disguises of dress or hue could conceal a faithful servant. Speak, then, without fear to Edith Plantagenet. She knows how to grace in adversity the good knight who served honour and did deeds of arms in her name, when fortune befriended him. Still silent! Is it fear or shame that keeps thee so? Fear should be unknown to thee, and for shame let it remain with those who have wronged thee." The knight, in despair at being obliged to play the mute in an interview so interesting, could only express his mortification by sighing deeply, and laying his fingers upon his lips. Edith stepped back as if somewhat displeased. "What?" she said. "The Asiatic mute in very deed, as well as in attire? This I looked not for. Or thou mayest scorn me, perhaps, for thus boldly acknowledging that I have heedfully observed the homage thou hast paid me. Hold no unworthy thoughts of Edith on that account. She knows well the bounds which reserve and modesty prescribe to high born maidens, and she knows when and how far they should give place to gratitude, to a sincere desire that it were in her power to repay services and repair injuries arising from the devotion which a good knight bore towards her. Why fold thy hands together and wring them with so much passion? Can it be," she added, shrinking back at the idea, "that their cruelty has actually deprived thee of speech? Thou shakest thy head. Be it a spell, be it obstinacy, I question thee no further, but leave thee to do thine errand, after thine own fashion. I also can be mute." The disguised knight made an action as if at once lamenting his own condition and deprecating her displeasure, while at the same time he presented to her, wrapped as usual in fine silk and cloth of gold, the letter of the Soldan. She took it, surveyed it carelessly, then laid it aside, and bending her eyes once more on the knight, said in a low tone of voice, "Not even a word to do thine errand to me?" He pressed both his hands to his brow, as if to intimate the pain which he felt at being unable to obey her, but she turned from him in anger. "Begone," she said. "I have spoken enough, too much, to one who will not waste on me a word in reply. Begone! And say, if I have wronged thee, I have done penance, for if I have been the unhappy means of dragging thee down from a station of honour, I have, in this interview, forgotten my own worth, and lowered myself in thine eyes and in my own." She covered her eyes with her hands, and seemed deeply agitated. Sir Kenneth would have approached, but she waved him back. "Stand off, thou whose soul Heaven hath suited to its new station. Aught less dull and fearful than a slavish mute had spoken a word of gratitude, were it but to reconcile me to my own degradation. Why pause you? Begone!" The disguised knight almost involuntarily looked towards the letter as an apology for protracting his stay. She snatched it up, saying in a tone of irony and contempt, "I had forgotten. The dutiful slave waits in answer to his message. How's this from the Soldan?" She hastily ran over the contents, which were expressed both in Arabic and French, and when she had done, she laughed in bitter anger. "Now this passes imagination," she said. "No jongleur can show so deft a transmutation. His legerdemain can transform zechins and byzants into doits and maravedis, but can his art convert a Christian knight, ever esteemed among the bravest of the Holy Crusade, into the dust-kissing slave of a heathen Soldan, the bearer of a Paynim's insolent proposals to a Christian maiden, nay, forgetting the laws of honourable chivalry as well as of religion? But it avails not talking to the willing slave of a heathen hound. Tell your master, when his skirt shall have found thee a tongue, that which thou hast seen me do." So saying, she threw the Soldan's letter on the ground, and placed her foot upon it. "And say to him that Edith Plantagenet scorns the homage of an unchristian pagan." With these words she was about to shoot from the knight, when, kneeling at her